So in the past week, Mark Hamill has given us another version of his opinion on The Last Jedi, on the sequel trilogy, and has also clarified a few things about his opinions. What he says here is definitely stirring the pot once again, and I think is quite controversial. And honestly, I don't care either way what you think of the sequel trilogy, whether you love it or hate it. Today, I'm just going to attempt to present what Mark Hamill said, the implications I think it has on Star Wars and on the fan base, and then also offer some of my personal opinions about it. The fact he's talking about things such as creating his own backstories for Luke Skywalker and having to do so because he felt that the film lacked that and he needed that as an actor, I think certainly once again reminds us that parts of the sequels were problematic. Hey everyone, it's Andrew. I want to start out by saying that I love Mark Hamill. I'm so glad he is so transparent about his opinions and has never really shied away from voicing them, especially around The Last Jedi, around The Force Awakens, and around his involvement in the sequel trilogy. During those times, he shared so many of his opinions, which he has now said that he kind of regrets being so open about, because you might remember him saying things such as this.
Harrison Ford again, and just talking about the old days, Carrie Fisher. How did you guys reminisce?
I said, you guys, I have a very bad feeling about this.
How did the most optimistic, hopeful character in the galaxy turn into this hermit who says it's time for the Jedi to end? I read that and I said, what?
You could argue that Mark Hamill going on the press tours for The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi was kind of unhinged. He said a lot.
Did your vision and Ryan's vision, did it coincide with the way that Luke ends up in this film that you thought it would all these years later?
No. I said to him, I said, Ryan, Jedis don't give up. I got to stop thinking old school because this is the new generation.
And was very honest and surprised about the direction in which they took Luke Skywalker, his character. He was surprised that he was a hermit, living a depressed life on a faraway island, hiding away from the rest of the galaxy. He was surprised that, unlike the Luke we saw in the original trilogy, who had endless amounts of hope, and unlike the Jedi, who were infinitely optimistic and willing to do whatever it took to solve problems, he was instead just living a quiet life on an island, essentially just waiting to die, feeling like he had failed. He'd failed the Jedi, he'd failed the Force, and had failed his friends.
I only know one truth. It's time for the Jedi to end. I thought, are you kidding me?
The bit that gets me is that Mark Hamill arguably has a better entrance for Luke Skywalker than they created for the sequels.
I'll tell you where I thought I came in the forest, when the lightsaber goes like this and flies off. I said, oh, what a great entrance. Ah! Ray caught it? She hasn't even been to Dagobah for training.
But all of these previous comments he's made, everything he's talked about in the past is once again recontextualized by what he's just said in this recent interview.
On this film, what's it called again? Last Jedi.
Now, in this recent interview on Bullseye with Jesse Thorne, we start with Mark Hamill talking about his respect for Rian Johnson.
Well, here's the thing, and I'd love to clear this up. Rian Johnson is one of the most gifted directors I've ever worked with. He's amiable, he's fun on set, he's smart, he made a great movie. And the fact that I went public with my dissatisfaction with the motivation for Luke becoming a suicidal hermit might have colored things in a way that maybe I should have kept that to myself.
Now, previously, all the way back in 2017, Mark Hamill has also tweeted about this, saying, I regret voicing my doubts and insecurities in public. Creative differences are a common element of any project, but usually remain private. All I wanted was to make a good movie. I got more than that. Rian Johnson made an all-time great one. And both of these instances are Mark Hamill smoothing things over, saying that he respects Rian Johnson as director, which he's clearly said in this interview, and it's clear that he is telling the truth here, and in no way wanted to foster the backlash that the community had for The Last Jedi. But what he says next, I think, is where things get a bit contradictory and where Mark Hamill had a problem with the sequel trilogy or with Luke Skywalker's character development within that, which we've known and has been well documented in the past.
First of all, I was frustrated when I read the first script and I said, we don't have any scene, even a brief reunion at all. I objected to that and I said, I think the fans are not going to like it. I was wrong.
But here he talks about how he felt Luke didn't have enough motivation to become the person he is in The Last Jedi.
This would just make Luke double down even. He said, well, your whole, your class at the Jedi Academy were wiped out. I said, Ryan, I saw entire planets wiped out. If anything, Luke doubles down and it hardens his resolve in the face of adversity.
I think potentially this is where a lot of fans thought they would take Luke's character. If The Last Jedi succeeds at one thing, it's subverting expectations. It's taking us places we didn't expect to go. But Mark Hamill felt Luke needed more of a reason to go down this path and to become that man. And therefore he requested a backstory for Luke Skywalker.
So I made up a much, much darker backstory that I thought could justify him being that way. What could make someone give up a devotion to what is basically a religious entity, to give up being a Jedi? Well, the love of a woman. So he falls in love with a woman. He gives up being a Jedi. They have a child together. At some point, the child, as a toddler, picks up an unattended lightsaber, pushes the button, and is killed instantly. The wife is so full of grief, she kills herself. That resonated with me so deeply.
So Mark here is at a point where he's read the script. He's read The Last Jedi. He's seen the direction Luke goes in. He's seen where Luke's character development has gone, but in his head, he can't picture the Luke Skywalker that he knows being in that place. Therefore, he's gone and created this remarkably dark backstory for Luke Skywalker where Luke's fallen in love, they've had a kid, the baby has died because of a lightsaber, then the woman has passed away, and now Luke is left alone and is left completely broken, shattered, and heartbroken. And I think, yeah, honestly, you can argue that this is how Luke got to the place he did. And you can argue that maybe there wasn't enough motivation for him to go here. I feel like the same could potentially be said for Anakin, though. A lot of people with The Revenge of the Sith have a problem with almost how easily Anakin turned to the dark side, and the way it's justified in that he had a traumatic childhood, his mother was killed and basically subjected to slavery her whole life, and then he also loses the only thing he loves in Padme by trying to save her, and this just flips him. It's over a woman. So Mark is essentially trying to do the same thing for Luke. The heartbreak of losing the ones he loved are what turned him not to the dark side, but into a depressed hermit. And in a way, this does parallel Anakin's story. Instead of turning to the dark side, though, Luke just receded into himself. But this next part, I think, is the most controversial. Mark says,
but he didn't have the time to tell a backstory like that, I'm guessing. He just wanted a brief thing to explain it. And to me, it didn't justify it.
Oh man, and that for me is like what hurts the most here, because he's literally saying that all of these ideas were voiced. All of this was spoken about in the production of The Last Jedi, and yet I guess most of Mark's ideas were just pushed to the side. They decided to go with the backstory they went with instead, that Luke lost the new Jedi Temple, the new Jedi Order, that Ben Solo essentially turned to the dark side, made that decision, and everything was destroyed. The Order was stripped down, and Luke felt like a failure. Is that enough justification for Luke becoming a hermit on this island? I'm going to leave that for you to decide. But a respect to Mark for still fully dedicating himself to the role and dedicating himself to the choices made by Rian Johnson.
Despite the fact that I disagree with your choices for Luke, I'm going to do everything within my power to make your screenplay work as best that I can. And the only thing unfortunate about that is I've heard comments from fans who think that I somehow dislike Rian Johnson, and nothing could be further from the truth.
I genuinely can't believe Mark is sharing all this again. He's stirring the pot again. He's reminding us of the different directions that The Last Jedi and the sequel trilogy could have gone in, and how we could have been looking at an entirely different trilogy altogether. I know a lot of people also speak about the disconnect between the two different directors, going from J.J. Abrams with The Force Awakens to Rian Johnson with The Last Jedi, J.J. Abrams again, and how there wasn't one structured narrative, and how they didn't have a start and end point when they started the trilogy, how they kind kind of just made things up along the way. And I can certainly understand Mark's frustrations with the character. I mean, this is a character that's defined his life in a way. This is what broke him out, but made him a superstar. And Mark Hamill is a true actor, someone who needs to truly understand the character they're playing, understand their motivations, their reasons for doing things, to be able to fully embody who that character is. In this interview, he even talks about the way he was originally cast as Luke Skywalker, that George Lucas is the kind of director who casts actors based on who they are in real life. For example, he cast Harrison Ford as Han Solo because he's the cool, rugged, cynical guy. And he cast Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker because he's that bright-eyed, optimistic, hopeful teenager we saw in A New Hope. Mark Hamill, in a way, has been that his whole life. And to see his character completely changed and his expectations for the direction his character went in completely flipped would certainly be quite jarring.
When I read 8, I told Ryan, I fundamentally disagree with virtually everything you've decided about my character.
Interesting as well, Mark Hamill hasn't seen the Star Wars movies he was in essentially since they came out. He said he watched the original trilogy as they released with the premieres. And then when the special editions were coming out in 1997, his kids are who prompted him to go to the cinemas.
So I saw each one again in 1997. But again, I haven't seen them since. I haven't seen the sequels. I saw them when they came out, but I don't go back and I don't read the novels, and the kids play the games, and there's all this ancillary material that's out there for the true fans. I don't, I do the job, I get the job done, and then I move on.
So because of this, Mark's real connection with Star Wars is just from his time filming, his time spent developing Star Wars, his time spent reading the scripts on set and performing the actual character. In recent years, he's certainly been more open to embracing the fact he's Luke Skywalker, as this was something I know he shied away from in the past. In fact, it was Carrie Fisher who eventually convinced him to start embracing it more. He's told stories about how she told him to get over himself, embrace the fact he's Luke Skywalker, and just be known as that Star Wars guy. And honestly, man, it's crazy to think how many different directions the sequels could have gone in, even to this day, nearly 10 years later. Interestingly though, in this interview, Mark also talks about how he originally thought Luke's character would be much darker in The Return of the Jedi, and that Luke would lean more towards the dark side after the events of The Empire Strikes Back. But when speaking about this to George Lucas back in the 80s, back when they were making them, George had to remind him that, hey, this is a kid's film.
He said, this is a film for kids, and we can't have that. That's why he would never kill any of the main characters. He wouldn't kill Han Solo or Princess Leia or Luke, and I've never forgotten that. He made it for children.
So perhaps if Luke had lost his child and his partner in Mark Hamill's backstory version of this, it would be too dark. I don't know though, isn't Star Wars better when it's darker? Look how good Andor was.
And who are you? Hey, look at me! Hey, look at me.
Part of me would love to be in that alternate universe where we saw a different version of the sequels, where they were planned from start to finish, where they had a start point and an end point, and where Luke had a different backstory and involvement altogether. So what do you think? Should it have been different? Should Luke have had this dark backstory? Or should they have just changed his character altogether? Or are you happy with Last Jedi? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe so I can get to 1 million subs before Battlefront 3, and maybe they'll make a new sequel trilogy. Just kidding. And follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Discord, TikTok, everywhere. And thanks for watching. Always remember,
stay bombastic.